I'm going to start with your time in Andy Merkin, and in particular your interest in pine martens, which were the subject of your book, A Richness of Martens. So what attracts you to this mustelid?
Well, I'm attracted to all wildlife, really. Mustelids are fantastic because they're such lithe and energetic and extraordinary little predators. And I've always had huge admiration for them. But when I was a child growing up in Ardnamurchan, so at the end of the 1960s, there were no pine martens there, which is really extraordinary to think of now. But there were lots of wildcats still there, which is amazing, but no pine martens. And the first pine marten I ever saw was a dead one. It was brought in a game bag into the public bar of my parents' hotel in Kilhoan. And I just was absolutely intrigued by this because it was so different to the ferrets and things I'd seen. People said it was either a ferret or a mink. They really didn't know what it was. And then one of the old crofters said, oh, I think it might be a marten cat. And I would have been about 7 or 8 then. And I just have been fascinated by them ever since and was always really keen to see them. And it took quite a long time before I started seeing them regularly. So Ardnamurchan has now become an amazing stronghold for them. So it's extraordinary how now there's no wildcats in Ardnamurchan, but there are pine martens. So things have all changed.
It's sort of reversed, unfortunately, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, they were so persecuted. I mean, wildcats were persecuted too in Ardnamurchan, but pine martens had been driven right out. Everyone said they ripped sheep's throats out. These were little animals that people had seen them ripping out the throats of sheep. And I always used to think, my God, what were the people imbibing? Were they on some sort of wacky backy or sort of homemade grog that they were still and, legal stills or magic mushrooms? I mean, we're talking about an animal the size of a sort of cat, a small cat, and, really to rip a sheep's throat out, they're not angels.
No, and it does surprise me the size of them. I mean, I suppose that's about accurate, isn't it? The size of a small cat. But I saw some at a hide in the Cairngorms. Is it Speyside hides? They do like little nighttime.
Yeah, there's lots of hides.
There's a few that do it, isn't it? And they come in close and take the egg and whatnot. And yeah, I mean, it's probably. I mean, I've got a very small dog. I've got a sausage dog, but it was about the size of my dog. And I was like, God,
sausage dog is probably quite a good. It's a different shape. Sausage dog maybe has a little bit more weight involved. The pine marten is all muscle. But I don't really see very many very fat pine martens.
So did they come back on their own to Ardnamurchan, or were they reintroduced?
No, they weren't reintroduced. I think what happened was the law came in, the Wildlife and Countryside Act was protecting them. And so, they weren't persecuted to the same degree. I think also the influx of huge amounts of forestry, blanket forestry, which didn't really suit other wildlife, but it did quite suit things like pine martens because it could hide away in that forestry. I mean, it's caused such terrible problems, commercial forestry, but for the pine marten, I think and for things like the fox as well, it's been quite a beneficial thing. And when that forestry was beginning to grow, there was fantastic habitat for small mammals before it got really enclosed. So pine martens were able to make quite a good recovery, I think. And I think just lack of persecution has really, changed things for the pine marten.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we'll get them back in England in numbers at some point. Because, of course, I mean, a lot of people associate them as a Scottish species, but historically they were all across the British Isles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're doing quite well in some parts of Wales, and aren't they back in the Forest of Dean?
That's right. I think, I can't remember if it was end of last year, beginning of this year, they reintroduced a few. And I know there are kind of unofficial pockets in some other parts of England as well. So, hopefully we'll I'd love to see them back. They can chomp on some of the grey squirrels, hopefully, as well.
They're amazing. I think the Vincent Wildlife Trust are doing a very good job with translocations, and I think they've been taking them from certain areas, under license. And I think they're doing a terrific job. They did a fantastic job with otters. They've worked with all sorts of amazing species. They're a great organisation. I've always been full of admiration for them. But I think that's because of their work that they're re-establishing down south. And I think people just love to see them. There's something sort of slightly mystical and magical about pine martens, and the fact that they like people, well, not like people, but interact with people. They'll come into your garden and I mean, extraordinary. They like strawberry jam and peanut.
Well, who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. And friends in Ardnamurchan who I wrote about, Les and Chris Humphreys, I mean, she bakes Victoria sponges for her pine martens every day.
Oh, I might turn up in her garden as well then.
Yes, I think it would be fantastic. So it is extraordinary. They are so Catholic in their diet. I mean, originally we thought it was just that they just ate hens and red squirrels, but actually that's completely not the case.
They'll anything that goes, they'll kind of have a go for, will they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, they do go into. We had one in the hen house about 10 years ago. We had a wee hole in the hen house we didn't know was there. Pine marten went in, to obviously nicked some eggs and wiped everybody out. I think it's typical sort of mustelid when there's a sort of cacophony of panicking hens. Then the pine marten goes into a frenzy and just kills. So, but I'm very philosophical about it. If they take my hens through the day, well, that's just bad luck. But we do shut everybody in, and we shut everybody in pretty early here because we have pine martens, foxes,
yeah,
badgers, otters, the odd mink, but very few mink, thankfully.
yeah.
So there's a lot of things waiting to have a chicken takeaway.
And the title of your book, A Richness of Martens, is that the collective term for pine
Yes,
martens?
yes, it is. And actually, the publisher was really keen to have that. And my next book that I'm supposed to be working on at the moment, but seem to be on a bit of a go slow because of the lovely weather. The next book is going to be called A Scurry of Squirrels, about red squirrels. So I sort of should get on with that.